Picture a block of chocolate, 4 ounces, dark brown, wrapped in wax paper and sealed in a small cardboard box. Now, try to bite it. Your teeth hit something that feels less like chocolate and more like compressed wood. The surface doesn't give. You press harder. Nothing. You're essentially trying to bite through a brick, a chocolate brick. If you manage to break off a piece, and some soldiers couldn't, the taste hits you like a punishment, bitter, dusty, chalky. It tastes, as one GI wrote home in 1943, like someone made chocolate out of sawdust and regret. This is the D-Ration bar, 4 ounces of concentrated calories designed by the United States Army to keep you alive. Not happy, not satisfied, just alive. And here's the thing that makes this story fascinating. The bar was designed this way, intentionally. The hardness, the bitterness, the way it sat in your stomach like a stone, all of it was planned, because the U.S. military had created something unprecedented. Food specifically engineered to be so unpleasant that you wouldn't want to eat it unless you were literally starving. Soldiers called it Hitler's secret weapon, not because the Germans made it, but because eating it felt like an attack from within, your own supply line turning against you. Chocolate as psychological warfare inflicted by your own quartermaster. Between 1941 and 1945, Hershey produced more than 3 billion of these bars. 3 billion. They went to every theater of war, North Africa, Italy, the Pacific Islands, Normandy beaches. Every American soldier carried at least 3 D-Ration bars in their pack, and almost every soldier, at some point, had to make a choice. Eat this thing or stay hungry. This is the story of that choice. But more than that, it's the story of how we engineer survival, how we reduce human need to a formula, how we take something as simple and joyful as chocolate and transform it into a weapon of last resort. It starts in 1937 in a chocolate factory in Pennsylvania with a man who has an impossible request. April 1937, Hershey, Pennsylvania. Captain Paul Logan walks into the offices of the Hershey Chocolate Corporation. He's from the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps, the people responsible for feeding millions of soldiers. He's got a problem, and he thinks Milton Hershey might be able to solve it. The problem is this. Modern warfare moves fast. Mechanized warfare. Tanks, trucks, airplanes. Armies don't stay in one place anymore. They advance rapidly, sometimes faster than supply lines can keep up. And when supply lines break down, soldiers still need to eat. But what do you give them? The Army already has field rations, C-rations, canned meals. But cans are heavy, they're bulky, they need can openers. And in extreme conditions, when a unit is cut off for moving fast, even C-rations are too much logistics. What the Army wants is something smaller, lighter, shelf-stable for years, something that can survive jungle heat and Arctic cold, something a soldier can carry in his pocket and forget about until the moment he absolutely needs it. An emergency ration, the last line between a soldier and starvation. And here's where it gets interesting, because Logan doesn't just want any emergency ration. He has very specific requirements, 4 of them, and the 4th one is bizarre. William Murray, president of Hershey, and Sam Henkel, the chief chemist, sit across from Logan and listen as he lists his requirements. First, the bar must weigh exactly 4 ounces, not more, not less. 4 ounces gives you about 600 calories, enough to sustain a man for most of a day if he's not doing heavy combat. Second, it must withstand high temperatures. The bar needs to survive in a soldier's pocket in North African desert heat, 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Regular chocolate melts at 91 degrees. This can't melt. Third, high food energy. Lots of calories packed into a small space. Chocolate is perfect for this. Chocolate is basically concentrated calories, fat and sugar bound together in the most efficient delivery system humans have ever invented. And fourth, this is the one that makes Murray and Hinkle look at each other. The fourth requirement is that the bar must taste, in Logan's exact words, only slightly better than a boiled potato. Murray stops him. Wait, you want us to make chocolate that tastes bad? Logan nods. Exactly. Because if it tastes good, soldiers will eat it. They'll eat it when they're bored, when they're nervous, when they're just a little hungry. Emergency rations need to be emergency rations. If they taste like candy, they become candy. And then when the real emergency comes, when a unit is cut off behind enemy lines with no supply drop, the soldier reaches into his pack and the chocolate is gone. He ate it 3 days ago because he was bored on guard duty. Make it taste bad enough, Logan says, and soldiers will save it. They'll only eat it when they truly need it, when the alternative is collapse. This is military logistics at its most ruthlessly practical. We're not feeding you, we're keeping you functional. Murray and Hinkle take the problem to Milton Hershey himself. He's 79 years old now, semi-retired, but still deeply involved in the company. He built this town, literally. Hershey, Pennsylvania exists because of chocolate. The factory, the schools, the parks, all of it funded by chocolate bars. And now the Army wants him to make the worst chocolate bar possible. Hershey listens to every detail. Then he tells them to do it. Get started immediately, whatever the Army needs. This isn't just patriotism, though Hershey is patriotic. It's also good business. The company is still recovering from the Depression. A massive government contract would stabilize everything. But more than that, Hershey understands the symbolism. American soldiers eating Hershey chocolate in combat. Even if it's terrible chocolate, it's still his chocolate, his name on the wrapper, his company supporting the war effort. So Sam Hinkle goes into the lab and starts experimenting. The challenge is technical and deeply weird. How do you make chocolate that doesn't melt? Chocolate melts because of cocoa butter. Cocoa butter has a low melting point. That's what makes chocolate smooth and pleasant. It melts on your tongue. But you can't just remove cocoa butter. Chocolate without cocoa butter isn't chocolate. It's cocoa powder. Hinkle's solution is to add things, lots of things. He starts with a standard chocolate base, chocolate liquor, sugar, cocoa butter. Then he adds oat flour. Oat flour binds everything together, makes it dense and stable. Then powdered skim milk for protein. More cocoa butter to increase the fat content, because fat is calories. Vanilla crystals for flavoring, though not much. And vitamin B1, thiamine, to prevent beriberi, a vitamin deficiency disease that causes nerve damage. He mixes it all together, and the result is this viscous, thick paste. It's so thick it won't flow. Normal chocolate manufacturing uses machines that pour melted chocolate into molds. This stuff won't pour. It's like trying to pour cement. So Hinkle has to do it by hand. Workers stand at tables, scooping the mixture into molds 4 ounces at a time. They pack it down with their hands, press it flat. Each bar takes minutes to make, and Hershey needs to make thousands, eventually millions. The first test batch is ready in June 1937. Hinkle sends it to Logan at the Quartermaster Corps. Logan tests it. He puts bars in ovens set to 120 degrees. He leaves them for days. The bars don't melt. They get softer, yes, but they hold their shape. A soldier could carry this in his pocket through a desert march. Logan tests the taste. He takes a bite. His report doesn't survive, but we can imagine his reaction, because everyone who tastes D-Ration for the first time has the same reaction. This is not chocolate. This is something pretending to be chocolate. This is chocolate's evil twin. But it works. It meets all 4 requirements. 4 ounces, heat-resistant, high-calorie, taste bad. The Army places its first order in November 1937. 5,000 bars for field testing. Nobody knows, not yet, that in 4 years the world will be at war, that Hershey will retool its entire factory for military production, that this terrible chocolate bar will become one of the most produced food items in human history. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. America enters the war, and overnight the D-Ration program goes from experimental to essential. The Quartermaster Corps contacts Hershey with a new order. Not 5,000 bars, not 50,000. They want millions, as many as Hershey can produce, the entire output of the factory if necessary. Sam Hinkle faces a problem. The D-Ration is still being made by hand, workers scooping paste into molds. You can't make millions of anything by hand. You need to industrialize it, automate it. But the mixture is too thick for normal chocolate equipment. Hinkle designs new machinery, custom molds, hydraulic presses that can pack the dense mixture into 4-ounce blocks. It takes months to build, months to calibrate. But by mid-1942, Hershey's factory is producing 24 million D-Ration bars per week. 24 million bars per week! The factory runs 24 hours a day, 3 shifts. Workers, mostly women now because the men are at war, operate the machines. The bars come off the line in an endless stream. Brown blocks wrapped in wax paper, packed into cardboard boxes, loaded onto trucks, shipped to ports, sent across oceans. And somewhere on a beach in North Africa, a soldier opens his pack and finds 3 D-Ration bars tucked next to his ammunition. Let me tell you about Private First Class Eddie Slovic. Not because he's famous for the D-Ration, but because his letters home capture what a lot of soldiers felt. Eddie is from Detroit. He's drafted in 1944, trained at Fort Bragg, shipped to France. He's not a combat soldier by temperament. He's scared. He writes letters to his wife Antoinette almost every day, and in one letter from September 1944, he mentions the rations. They gave us these chocolate bars. They're supposed to be food, but I swear to God they taste like the inside of a boot. I tried to eat one and nearly broke my tooth. Some of the guys are using them as ammunition. You can throw them pretty good. This becomes a running joke among soldiers. The D-Ration as weapon. One GI claims he knocked out a German soldier by throwing a D-Ration at his head. It's probably not true, but the story circulates anyway. Because the bars are genuinely hard, rock hard. If you try to bite one straight, you risk dental work. The instructions printed on the wrapper say to eat the bar slowly, over the course of 30 minutes. Nibble it. Let it dissolve in your mouth. Or break it into pieces and dissolve it in hot water to make a drink. But soldiers in combat don't have 30 minutes. They don't have hot water. They have 60 seconds between artillery barrages, hands shaking from adrenaline, trying to get calories into their system before the next wave. So they improvise. Some soldiers shave slices off the bar with their combat knives, thin slices, almost like you'd slice cheese. They eat it in tiny bites because anything bigger is impossible to chew. Others smash the bars with their rifle butts, breaking them into chunks. A few try to melt them over campfires, but that usually just makes a sticky burn mess. And the taste. God, the taste. Imagine chocolate with almost no sugar. Bitter cocoa mixed with oat flour. The texture is grainy, chalky. It doesn't melt on your tongue, it sort of crumbles. And the oat flour gives it this dusty quality, like you're eating compressed sawdust flavored with cocoa. One soldier, Technical Sergeant Morris Cohen from Brooklyn, writes in his diary, "Ate D-Ration today. Tasted like they'd extracted every pleasant molecule from chocolate and replaced it with disappointment. But I'm alive and I'm not hungry anymore, so I guess it works." That's the thing. It works. It keeps you alive. The 600 calories in a D-Ration bar can sustain a person through a day of moderate activity. It's not pleasant, but it's enough. And in truly desperate situations, when supply lines are cut and regular rations aren't coming through, the D-Ration becomes precious. Soldiers who joked about throwing them away suddenly guard them carefully. Because when you haven't eaten in 2 days, even terrible chocolate starts looking good. The Battle of the Bulge, December 1944. The German army launches a massive surprise offensive through the Ardennes forest. American units are scattered, surrounded, cut off. Supply drops are impossible because of weather. Snow and fog ground the plains. The 101st Airborne Division is encircled at Bastogne. They're running out of ammunition, medical supplies, and food. For days, the only reliable food source is the D-Ration bars in their packs. Sergeant Donald Burgett of the 101st later writes about eating D-Rations in a frozen foxhole, snow piling up around him, German artillery shelling the town. He can't make a fire because the light would draw sniper fire. He can't even feel his hands. He takes out a D-Ration bar, and it's so cold it's even harder than usual. He has to put it inside his jacket, against his body, for 20 minutes just to soften it enough to bite. When he finally eats it, he describes the taste as like eating frozen dirt flavored with chocolate's distant cousin. But it gives him energy. Enough energy to stay alert through his watch. Enough to survive another day. This is what the D-Ration was designed for. Not comfort, not pleasure, survival. Pure, unvarnished survival. But there's a cost that Captain Logan and Sam Hinkle didn't fully anticipate. The D-Ration bars are hard to digest. The high cocoa fat content, the oat flour, the density of the bar, it all combines to create something that your digestive system struggles with. Soldiers who eat D-Rations often experience severe constipation, or the opposite, diarrhea, stomach cramps, nausea. This is where the nickname comes from, Hitler's secret weapon. Because eating a D-Ration might keep you from starving, but it might also put you out of commission for hours with digestive distress. In combat, that's dangerous. A soldier who can't move, who's doubled over with cramps, is a liability. Some units start calling them something else, Hitler's revenge, or just the poison bar. One medic in Italy keeps a log of soldiers reporting to sick call after eating D-Rations. In 1 week, 43 men. 43 soldiers temporarily incapacitated not by enemy action, but by their own emergency rations. The Army knows about this. By 1943, complaints are flooding in. Soldiers refusing to carry D-Rations, officers writing reports about the negative morale effects. Men would literally rather stay hungry than eat them. The Quartermaster Corps goes back to Hershey with a new request. Can you make it better? Keep all the specifications, the weight, the heat resistance, the calories, but make it edible. Make it something soldiers won't actively dread. Sam Hinkle goes back to the lab. He knows he can't make it taste good. The Army doesn't want that. But maybe he can make it less terrible. He experiments with different ratios. More sugar, but not too much. different binders instead of so much oat flour, better flavoring. By late 1943, Henkel has developed a new version, the Tropical Bar. It's designed for the Pacific Theater, where heat is even more extreme. Same 4 ounces, same high calorie count, but it uses different fats that are more stable in heat, and it tastes marginally better. Not good, but marginally better. The Tropical Bar starts shipping out in 1944. Soldiers notice the difference immediately. It's still hard, it's still bitter, but it's not quite as hard and quite as bitter. One Marine on Iwo Jima writes home, "They gave us new chocolate. Still tastes like punishment, but at least now it's punishment I can chew." This is progress, apparently. June 6th, 1944. D-Day, the beaches of Normandy. Private First Class Harold Baumgarten from Brooklyn lands with the 116th Infantry Regiment on Omaha Beach. He's 19 years old. It's barely dawn. The ramp of the landing craft drops, and machine gun fire tears through his unit before they even reach the sand. Harold makes it to the beach. He's hit. Shrapnel in his face. He's bleeding. Men are dying around him. The beach is chaos. Fire from the cliffs, bodies in the water, smoke and noise and terror. Harold finds cover behind a steel obstacle, one of the German beach defenses. He's pinned down. He can't advance, he can't retreat. The tide is coming in. And he realizes he's been hit more than once. His leg, his arm. He's losing blood. He's also losing strength. He hasn't eaten since the night before, 18 hours ago. And now he's wounded and trapped, and his body is starting to shut down from blood loss and shock. He reaches into his pack and pulls out a D-Ration bar. His hands are shaking, covered in sand and salt water and blood. He tears open the wrapper. The bar is intact, miraculously, waterproof packaging. He breaks off a piece with his fingers because it can't bite through it. His face is injured, his jaw screaming with pain. He eats the piece, then another. He forces it down even though everything in him wants to vomit. The chocolate tastes like metal and despair, but he keeps eating because he knows, on some animal level, that he needs the calories. He needs the energy if he's going to survive the next 5 minutes. Harold Baumgarten survives D-Day. He survives the war. 60 years later, he gives interviews about his experiences. He talks about the landing, the casualties, the fear, and he always mentions the D-Ration bar. "I hated that chocolate," he says in a 2003 interview. "It was the worst thing I ever tasted, but it kept me alive. I ate it on the beach, and it gave me just enough strength to keep moving. When the order came to advance up the bluff, I could move. Barely, but I could move. I think about that sometimes, how something I hated might have saved my life." This is the paradox of the D-Ration. It's terrible, but it works. Across every theater of war, this scene repeats. Soldiers in desperate situations reaching for the D-Ration bar because there's nothing else. In the jungles of New Guinea, soldiers with malaria, shaking with fever, forcing down D-Rations because the alternative is starvation. In the frozen forests of Belgium during the Battle of the Bulge, men eating frozen D-Rations because they can't make fires. On the beaches of the Pacific Islands, Marines eating D-Rations between waves of banzai charges. The bars become symbols. Symbols of hardship, yes, but also symbols of perseverance. You eat the D-Ration when you have no choice, when you've reached the point where comfort doesn't matter anymore, where taste doesn't matter, where nothing matters except the next breath, the next hour, making it through. Lieutenant Robert Edlin, 2nd Ranger Battalion, carries D-Rations during the assault on Pointe du Hoc. He and his men scale 100-foot cliffs under fire using ropes and ladders. When they reach the top, they're supposed to destroy German artillery, but the guns aren't there. The Germans move them. The Rangers have to defend the position against counterattacks, cut off from resupply for 2 days. They eat D-Rations. That's all they have. D-Rations and water from their canteens. Edlin later says the D-Ration kept them functional. We joked that the Germans couldn't kill us, but the chocolate might. But we ate it anyway, because there was nothing else. Let me tell you about the strange economics of the D-Ration in combat zones. Back home, Hershey sells chocolate bars for 5 cents. A nickel gets you a full-size Hershey bar, smooth, sweet, normal chocolate. In the Pacific Theater, soldiers start trading D-Rations, not for food, because nobody wants to eat them, but as currency. 1 D-Ration bar equals 3 cigarettes, or 1 letter-writing kit, or a promise to take someone's guard duty. The bars have value not because of their taste, but because of their durability. They're stable. They don't spoil. You can carry them for months. Some soldiers send them home as souvenirs. Look what the Army feeds us, they write. Families back home try to eat them and can't believe soldiers are expected to survive on such terrible food. One mother in Ohio writes to her congressman complaining about the D-Rations. How can we ask our boys to fight on such terrible food? The congressman writes back explaining that D-Rations are emergency rations only, not primary food. The mother writes back, "My son says he ate them for 6 days straight on Guadalcanal." This is the reality. The official policy says emergency only. The actual experience is often very different. When logistics break down, which happens constantly in war, the D-Ration becomes the only ration. And soldiers adapt. Humans always adapt. In North Africa, soldiers discover that if you leave a D-Ration in the sun for hours, it softens enough to be spreadable. They start spreading it on hardtack crackers like Nutella. It's still terrible, but at least it's terrible in a new way. In the Pacific, some soldiers trade D-Rations to locals for fresh fruit. The locals use them as cooking chocolate, melting them down, adding sugar and coconut milk, making something edible. The soldiers get mangoes and bananas. Everyone wins, except maybe Hershey's reputation. In Europe, soldiers discover that French and Belgian children have never tasted chocolate because of the war. The German occupation, the rationing, these kids don't know what chocolate is. So soldiers start giving away their D-Rations to children. The kids eat them and don't even know they're supposed to taste bad. To them, this is chocolate. This bitter, hard brick is a revelation. It's sweet compared to hunger. This creates strange scenes. American soldiers walking through liberated French villages handing out D-Ration bars to children who accept them like gifts from heaven. The soldiers know these bars are terrible. They've been complaining about them for years. But to these children, they're miracle food. Chocolate from America. Proof that better times are coming. One soldier, Private James Pemberton from Georgia, writes about this in a letter. "We gave our D-Rations to some kids in a little French town. They ate them like candy. It broke my heart a little bit. These kids have been so hungry that even our terrible chocolate tastes good to them. Makes you think about what we take for granted." By 1945, Hershey has produced more than 3 billion D-Ration bars. 3 billion. If you laid them end to end, they'd stretch around the Earth twice. If you stacked them, they'd reach into space. The factory in Hershey, Pennsylvania, ships more than 1 million bars per day. And then, in August 1945, the war ends. Japan surrenders. The shooting stops. And suddenly, the military doesn't need 3 billion chocolate bars anymore. The Quartermaster Corps cancels the D-Ration contract. Hershey stops production immediately. The factory retools for peacetime production. Sweet chocolate. Chocolate people actually want to eat. But there's a problem. There are millions of D-Ration bars still in circulation, in warehouses, on ships, in supply depots across Europe and the Pacific. The military has no use for them anymore. Neither does anyone else. What do you do with millions of bars of deliberately bad chocolate? The answer varies depending on where you are. In Europe, the military dumps massive quantities of D-Rations into civilian food distribution programs. The Marshall Plan is rebuilding Europe. Part of that is feeding people. Germany is starving. Austria is starving. Much of Eastern Europe is starving. So American surplus food gets distributed, including D-rations. German civilians in 1946 are eating American emergency chocolate. They don't complain about the taste. They're grateful for the calories. This is the irony. Hitler's secret weapon, which American soldiers mocked and hated, becomes a lifeline for defeated Germans who have nothing. In the Pacific, a lot of D-rations simply get dumped. Islands that served as supply bases now have huge stockpiles of surplus equipment and food. The military doesn't want to ship it home, so they destroy it. They push jeeps into the ocean. They burn tents. They bulldoze food into pits and cover it with dirt. Some islands still have these dumps. Buried D-ration bars wrapped in wax paper, preserved by the dry conditions. Archaeologists occasionally find them. The chocolate is still hard, still inedible, preserved by its own indestructibility. Back in America, some D-rations make it to the domestic market. Surplus stores sell them cheap. Hikers buy them, hunters, people who need lightweight, shelf-stable food, and they discover what soldiers knew. The bars keep you alive, but you won't enjoy it. But here's what's interesting. The D-ration changes chocolate forever. The technology developed for the D-ration, the ways to stabilize chocolate at high temperatures, the methods for packing maximum calories into minimum space, all of that gets applied to civilian chocolate production. After the war, Hershey introduces new products using D-ration technology. Chocolate that's more stable, that travels better, that lasts longer on store shelves. The lessons learned making terrible chocolate help make better chocolate. And the military doesn't give up on emergency chocolate. The D-ration is discontinued, but the concept remains. In the 1950s, the military develops the tropical bar, an improved version, less bitter, slightly easier to chew, still not good, but better. Then in the 1960s, they try again, new formulas, new stabilizers. By Vietnam, soldiers are getting chocolate rations that are almost edible. Almost. Veterans of Vietnam still complain about them, but not with the same vehemence as World War II veterans complained about the D-ration. The quest continues through the decades. The 1980s bring MREs, meals ready to eat. These include chocolate in various forms, brownies, cookies, all shelf-stable, all heat-resistant, all engineered to survive years in storage, and most of them are actually edible. By the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, soldiers are getting M&Ms in their MREs, real candy. It tastes good. It melts in your mouth, not in your hand, thanks to a candy coating. The circle is complete. Military chocolate has gone from deliberately terrible to actually pleasant. But veterans of World War II never forget the D-ration. Harold Baumgarten, who ate one on Omaha Beach, keeps a D-ration wrapper his entire life. He frames it, hangs it in his study. When people ask about it, he tells the story. The beach, the fear, the terrible chocolate that kept him alive. Eddie Slovic, the soldier from Detroit who wrote about throwing them, doesn't survive the war, but not from combat. Eddie deserts. He walks away from his unit, turns himself in, and in one of the war's great injustices, he's executed. He's the only American soldier executed for desertion in World War II. His letters home, including the one about the D-rations, survive. They're published decades later, and that throwaway line about the terrible chocolate becomes a small window into his humanity. He was just a kid who was scared, who wrote home about normal things like bad food before his life ended in a tragedy that had nothing to do with chocolate. Donald Burgett, who ate D-rations in a frozen foxhole at Bastogne, writes a memoir. He describes the D-ration in detail. It was proof that you could survive anything if you had to. If you could eat that and keep going, you could do anything. This becomes a common theme in veteran memoirs, the D-ration as metaphor. It represents hardship, endurance, the ability to do what's necessary even when it's unpleasant. In 2001, a veterans group in Pennsylvania organizes a D-ration tasting event. They track down original D-ration bars from private collections, bars that are 56 years old. They gather, these elderly men who once carried these bars into combat, and they eat them again. The bars are still hard, still bitter. Time hasn't improved them. If anything, they're worse. But the veterans laugh, they swap stories, they remember. For a few minutes, they're 19 again, scared and hungry, eating terrible chocolate because it's all they have. One veteran, Ray Lambert, who was a medic on Omaha Beach, takes a bite and immediately spits it out. Nope, he says, still terrible. How did we ever eat these? Everyone laughs. But then he gets serious. But you know what? I'd give anything to go back to when eating this was my biggest problem. This is what the D-Ration becomes in memory, a symbol of a time when they were young, when life was difficult but meaningful, when they were part of something larger than themselves. The Hershey factory in Pennsylvania eventually creates a small museum display about the D-Ration. They have original bars, original packaging, photographs of the production line. Tourists visit and look at these artifacts of chocolate history. What they don't see is the women who worked those production lines. 24 hours a day, 3 shifts, making millions of bars per week while their husbands and sons and brothers were overseas, possibly eating those very bars. One of those women, Margaret Wilson, worked at Hershey from 1942 to 1945. In an oral history recorded in 1985, she talks about the work. "We knew the chocolate was terrible," she says. "The smell alone told you it wasn't normal. It was bitter and strange. But we made it anyway, because somewhere a soldier needed it. Maybe it was terrible, but it was ours. It was something we could do." This is the other side of the D-Ration story, the home front. Women who made weapons and ammunition and terrible chocolate, all part of the same war effort. They didn't carry rifles, but they kept the soldiers supplied. Their work was as essential as any combat role. Sam Hinkle, the chief chemist who designed the D-Ration, stays with Hershey until his retirement in 1956. He never talks much about the D-Ration. He's more proud of other work, improvements to regular chocolate, new products. But his obituary in 1968 mentions it. Creator of the D-Ration bar that fed millions of American soldiers during World War II. Fed. That's the word they use. Not tormented or punished. Fed. Because that's what it did. It fed them. It kept them alive. Milton Hershey, who approved the project in 1937, dies in 1945, just months after the war ends. He's 88. He lives just long enough to see his company's role in the victory, just long enough to know that Hershey chocolate, even terrible Hershey chocolate, helped win the war. Captain Paul Logan, the quartermaster who started it all, remains in the Army after the war. He retires as a colonel in 1952. His service record mentions his work on the D-Ration project. Developed emergency ration system that sustained U.S. forces through World War II. He's proud of it. Years later, at a retirement ceremony, someone asks if he ever actually ate a D-Ration. He smiles. "Once," he says. "That was enough." Today, you can still find D-Ration bars. Not in stores, obviously, but in private collections, military museums, online auctions. Collectors pay surprising amounts for them. $200, $300. Not to eat them. Nobody wants to eat them, but as artifacts. These bars represent something specific about American ingenuity and American pragmatism. The willingness to engineer solutions to problems even when those solutions are unpleasant. The D-Ration wasn't elegant, it wasn't sophisticated, it was just effective. And that's very American. Build something that works, don't worry about making it pretty, don't worry about making it pleasant, just make it work. But there's something else the D-Ration represents, something darker. The reduction of human need to pure utility. Think about chocolate for a moment. Real chocolate. What it means to people. It's comfort food. It's celebration. It's romance and childhood and joy. Chocolate is one of humanity's great pleasures. We've been consuming it for thousands of years. The Mayans made it into drinks. The Aztecs used it as currency. Europeans transformed it into candy. Chocolate is wrapped up in human happiness. And the D-Ration took all of that and stripped it away. It took chocolate and engineered the pleasure out of it, left only the calories, only the function. It's chocolate as fuel, chocolate as medicine, chocolate as survival. This is what war does. It reduces everything to function. Beauty becomes irrelevant. Pleasure becomes frivolous. Only survival matters. Only winning matters. And if that means eating terrible chocolate, so be it. The soldiers understood this. They hated the D-Ration, yes, but they also understood why it existed. They understood they were living in a world where normal rules didn't apply, where you ate what you were given, where you did what you had to do. And when the war ended, when they came home, one of the great pleasures was eating normal chocolate again, sweet chocolate, smooth chocolate, that melted on your tongue and tasted like it was supposed to taste. That simple pleasure, which they had taken for granted before the war, became precious. There's a veteran interview from 1995, part of an oral history project. The interviewer asks this former Marine what he missed most during the war. The Marine thinks for a long time. Mail from home, he finally says, and second, honestly, was decent chocolate. I know that sounds trivial compared to everything else, but man, I dreamed about Hershey bars. Real ones. Not those D-Ration bricks. Just normal, sweet chocolate. First thing I did when I got back to the States was buy a Hershey bar. I sat on a bench outside the store and I ate it slowly. And I cried. Just sat there crying and eating chocolate. This is what the D-Ration helps us understand. The value of normal things. The gift of ordinary pleasures. We take them for granted until they're gone. I tried to find a D-Ration to taste for this project. I wanted to experience it firsthand, to understand what soldiers went through. I found one eventually, a bar from 1944, still wrapped in its original packaging, 78 years old. I paid $260 for it. It arrived in the mail in a plastic case, protected like a museum artifact. I opened it carefully. The wrapper was yellowed but intact. The wax paper was still sealed. I unwrapped the bar. It looked like a bar of chocolate, dark brown, 4 ounces, compressed and dense. But when I touched it, it felt wrong. Too hard, too cold, like holding a rock. I tried to bite it. I couldn't. My teeth couldn't penetrate the surface. I got a knife and shaved off a thin slice. I put it in my mouth. The taste was immediate and awful. Bitter, chalky, dusty. It didn't dissolve. It crumbled on my tongue like dirt. There was a hint of chocolate flavor, buried under everything else, but it was overwhelmed by bitterness and this strange chemical taste that I later learned was probably rancid oat flour. I spit it out. I couldn't help it. Even knowing what it was, even understanding its purpose, I couldn't swallow it. And this bar had been sitting in climate-controlled storage for 78 years. Imagine eating one fresh in a jungle, in a desert, in a frozen foxhole. Imagine being so hungry that this tasted good. That's what veterans tell you. When you're hungry enough, everything tastes good. Or at least, everything tastes tolerable. The D-Ration might be terrible, but it's better than nothing. It's better than the alternative. And that's the lesson, isn't it? Sometimes good enough is all you need. Sometimes terrible is fine if it keeps you alive. The D-Ration wasn't perfect. It wasn't even good, but it achieved its purpose. It kept soldiers alive. From North Africa to Normandy, from Guadalcanal to Okinawa, American soldiers survived on these terrible chocolate bars. They complained about them, they joked about them, they threw them at each other, they used them as currency, but when it mattered, when they had no other choice, they ate them. And the bars did their job. 3 billion bars, 600 calories each, 1.8 trillion calories distributed across every theater of World War II. That's the mathematical legacy of the D-Ration. Numbers on a spreadsheet in some quartermaster's office. But the human legacy is something else entirely. It's Harold Baumgarten on Omaha Beach, eating chocolate with shaking, bloody hands. It's Donald Burgett in a frozen foxhole at Bastogne, warming a bar against his body before taking a bite. It's thousands of soldiers in thousands of desperate moments reaching into their packs and finding this small, hard, terrible thing that would keep them alive another day. It's also Margaret Wilson and thousands of other women working factory lines making these bars 24 hours a day, 3 shifts, year after year. It's Sam Hinkle in his lab trying to figure out how to make chocolate survive desert heat. It's Captain Paul Logan understanding that sometimes the best solution is the one nobody will like, but everyone will use. It's all of these people doing difficult work, making hard choices, because the alternative was losing the war. And here's what I keep coming back to. The D-Ration was designed to be bad. That was its purpose. Make it so terrible that soldiers won't eat it unless they truly need it. And it worked. Soldiers hated it, but they saved it. They carried it. And when they needed it, it was there. This is a strange kind of success. Success through deliberate unpleasantness. Success through controlled suffering. But it's success nonetheless. The D-Ration saved lives. Not dramatically, not in ways you can measure, but quietly, constantly. It provided calories when there were no other calories available. It gave energy when there was no other energy. It sustained soldiers through the moments when everything else failed. You can't build a monument to that. You can't pin a medal on a chocolate bar. But you can remember. You can understand what it represented. You can acknowledge that sometimes the most important things are the things nobody wants but everyone needs. The last D-Ration bar was probably eaten sometime in the late 1940s. Some soldier, somewhere, finding one in an old pack, eating it because why not? Or maybe it was later. Maybe some survivalist in the 1950s bought military surplus and ate D-Rations on a camping trip. Maybe someone ate one in the 1960s, just to see what it was like. But eventually, all the edible ones were eaten or disposed of. The ones that remain are artifacts now, museum pieces, collectibles, no longer food, just memory. And maybe that's appropriate, because the D-Ration was never really about chocolate. It was about survival. It was about doing what you had to do. It was about finding a way through impossible circumstances with whatever tools you had available, even if those tools were terrible. The soldiers who ate D-Rations are mostly gone now. The veterans are dying. The W2 generation is fading. Soon there will be no one left who remembers the taste of that terrible chocolate. No one who remembers the weight of it in their pack. No one who remembers the choice, eat this or stay hungry. But the story remains. The story of American chocolate made deliberately bad, of 3 billion bars manufactured in 3 years, of soldiers from Brooklyn and Detroit and Georgia and everywhere else, united by their shared hatred of emergency rations, of women working factory lines, of chemists solving impossible problems, of everyone doing their part. This is the real legacy of the D-Ration. Not the chocolate itself, but what it represents. The willingness to do hard things, the ability to survive on less than you need, the determination to keep going even when everything, including your food, is working against you. I'm holding that 78-year-old D-Ration bar now, the one I paid too much money for, the one I couldn't eat. It's heavier than it looks, 4 ounces, but it feels like more. Maybe because I know what it represents. Maybe because I understand its history. This bar was made in 1944. Somewhere in Pennsylvania, a woman whose name I'll never know scooped the mixture into a mold. She pressed it down. She wrapped it in wax paper. She packed it in a box. She sent it on its way. It went to Europe, probably. Maybe it was in someone's pack on D-Day. Maybe it was eaten at Bastogne. Or maybe it was never eaten at all. Maybe a soldier carried it through the entire war and brought it home, kept it as a souvenir, this terrible thing he never wanted to eat but couldn't throw away. And now it's here, in my hand, a small piece of history, a monument to pragmatism and suffering and survival. If I could, I'd go back and thank that woman who made this bar. I'd tell her it mattered, that her work, boring and repetitive and strange as it must have been, was essential, that soldiers survived because of what she made. I'd thank Sam Hinkle for solving an impossible problem, for figuring out how to make chocolate that wouldn't melt, that would last, that would save lives, even if everyone hated it. I'd thank Captain Paul Logan for understanding that sometimes you have to make hard choices, that sometimes the right answer is the unpopular one, that sometimes you have to be willing to make people uncomfortable to keep them alive. And I'd thank the soldiers, all of them, the ones who complained about the D-Ration, and the ones who ate it anyway, the ones who joked about it, and the ones who depended on it. Thank them for enduring, for surviving, for doing what they had to do. Because that's the final lesson of the D-Ration. You do what you have to do. You eat terrible chocolate because the alternative is worse. You endure discomfort because the alternative is failure. You keep going because stopping isn't an option. The D-Ration was never meant to be loved. It was meant to be used, and it was, by millions of soldiers, in thousands of desperate situations across every corner of the world where Americans fought. It did its job. That terrible, hard, bitter, indestructible chocolate bar did exactly what it was supposed to do. It kept people alive. And in the end, that's all that matters.